Welcome back to another episode of Create Space, a podcast that finds joy in the art of storytelling. Today, I am thrilled to be welcoming a fellow media educator to the show today. Spencer O'Daniel is a veteran journalism and media advisor, and he has experience at both the high school as well as the collegiate level. Now, he has built programs from scratch as well as elevated established programs to national award-winning levels through their content and creation. Spencer has experience in basically all fields of storytelling, and he particularly excels in fostering a culture of learning new skills, innovative storytelling techniques, and cultivating award-winning content. Now, I actually had the privilege of pursuing both my undergrad and graduate degrees alongside Spencer, and it has been nothing short of incredible to see what he has done in the industry and the passion for our craft that he is now instilling in the younger generations. And so I know I have learned a ton from talking to him, and you are all going to learn so much from listening to this episode. I'm so thankful that he was willing to join us today, and I can't wait for you to meet him. It is my pleasure to welcome Spencer O'Daniel to the show today. So Spencer is a journalist, a creator, media advisor, master journalism educator, all of the things. So first of all, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's spring break, and it was like a perfect time to come on.
Yes, absolutely. And it's spring break for me too. So yeah, I was like, this is the week to nab Spencer.
Absolutely.
So Spencer, we're here to talk about storytelling and the creation process and journalism, and specifically how you are teaching and guiding the future storytellers through your job right now at Maze. But first, could you just give us a background to who you are as a journalist and now an educator, and kind of how all that came to be?
Yeah, for me, the love for journalism and media and broadcasting and video and kind of all the things I do started in high school broadcasting. So I actually got a chance in my high school broadcasting class to do a pregame and postgame and in-game analysis of basketball teams in my town where I'm from, Belle Plaine, Kansas. So in my small town, the only sport I didn't play was basketball. I got a chance with my best friend to do that broadcasting stuff during the actual games. And that's kind of where I developed a love of broadcast journalism. And obviously my goal shortly after was to be that big ESPN anchor, right? Like be the person on the sidelines or narrating Sports Center at 6 o'clock, right? And went to college. And Anita Cochran came in my class at actually the Elliott School of Communications. You might have been in the same class, actually. She said, hey, if you want to see your family growing up and you don't want to be the person in a snowstorm on Friday night at 11 p.m., you really need to think about if you really want to do this broadcast journalism thing.
Right.
So also, I'm the oldest in my family. And I remember coaching my sister's basketball teams and growing up and just even making breakfast for my sisters when I was growing up. I was the oldest, and I've always liked working with little kids. And my high school broadcast advisor made a really big impact on me. And so I kind of wanted to keep my love of journalism and media going, but also working with children. And that's how I kind of got the idea of maybe I could just be like a journalism media advisor at the high school level. Switched, best move I ever made. I did switch after about 60 or 70 hours into broadcast journalism, so it took me 6 years to graduate with my undergrad from here. But then took the core classes at the education school at Wichita State, but I was also involved with everything else still going on at the Elliott School, so I was getting this like perfect dose of becoming a teacher and student media and advertising, marketing, public relations, qualitative, quantitative, like everything to build a well-rounded journalist as well. And so I got my first job at Wichita West High School.
West, I forgot you worked at West, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the only place that gave me an interview out of the three places I applied. I applied at Chapman High School too, and they all wanted an English teacher, and I really wasn't about that. I just wanted to advise student media. And I had a great experience, watching Amy Duvall with the Sunflower and my student teacher, Sharon Martin at Wichita East. She was just amazing. And watching those two people do student media and my high school media advisor, I was like, I want to go all in, big school, 5A, 6A, all student media. I didn't get that chance to start at West, so it took me a couple of years to build that full curriculum of student media. I had to teach English. It was painful, and you'd have to ask some of my former alumni how I did at that. But eventually I built up the enrollment enough at West Actually started with 3 kids that helped make the news mag and yearbook together. So 3 kids were doing news mag, and then 2 of the 3 didn't even want to do the yearbook, and they had to make a yearbook. And so eventually we became 140 in year 4. In year 5, we had the biggest enrollment in Wichita, photo imaging, 21st century journalism, just this like healthy dose of all these classes, and built it from 3 to that. And then we won a state championship in 2017.
So you went from 3 to 140 in how many years?
It took about 5 years. Yeah.
Wow. I feel like you glossed over that. Like, that's normal growth. That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean,
that's crazy.
I think it went from like 3 to 9, and then 9 to 50, and then 50, and then just,
you just hit exponential growth at that point.
Yeah. We made it a fun place to be. We had like a community and a culture. We did this dodgeball tournament to fundraise money. And we just like took pride in our work, and we'll talk about this later, the contests and competitions aspect. But man, it was amazing. And to do it all at West, it meant even more, because so many of our kids, it was like their niche thing at West. You know, they didn't play sports, they didn't sing, they didn't do JRTC. It was like journalism became their thing, and they were so passionate about it. And they were just like what I like to call just dogs, like completely committed to the program. And then I knew it was like time to do something different. Went to Kansas State and advised student media there for the collegiate media group. I got to do the Royal Purple Yearbook, Manhattan Magazine. Got to teach a summer journalism workshop called the Flint Hills Publications Workshop that many in Wichita know about and have taught at as well. Mm-hmm. And got to see like kind of the financial business side of a nonprofit organization at the collegiate media group. And that was amazing. And then it was time to start our family. So when we started our family, my wife, Jenna, who's a first grade teacher, she decided, hey, let's come back to Wichita where there's our villages to take care of the kids.
Absolutely.
And actually didn't really want to leave Kansas State. I was really enjoying my time there. Moved back to Wichita. And luckily enough, they had created this new position at the Mays Career Academy, where it was like half broadcast, half news magazine at Mays South. By combining some positions, the Mays Career Academy was just a year old. It was this facility connected to Mays High where I'm at now.
Right.
So everything was like in the process of growing. The job opened. She went back to her former school and had that job like in January before coming back. And then that position opened in February, and I was like, okay. Obviously, I was looking at Wichita State. Nothing was available at the time. That would have been a really cool thing, but I said, if I'm going to go back to high school advising when I'm like pretty good at, this is a great place to be, because I get to do the website and the multimedia things that I feel like I'm really good at. And I fell into that position, and here I am 4 years later, and it was the right move. Like, it's just been amazing in Mays. And I guess what's really cool is just going from West to K-State to Mays is I feel like I've gotten to see student media and school populations and diversity and like nonprofit to like educational high school atmosphere. I've gotten to see a little bit of everything in those 3 spots. So it's been 11 years, but it feels like it's been a lot more than that because of my experiences at 3 different locations. Yeah,
there's a lot of diversity there in experience and in people that you're working with and in strategies that you would be using. I mean, there's a lot of different things there.
Yeah.
And I think too, it's interesting because I mean, you built the program at West for sure. And then even at Mays, I mean, there was a program there, but you absolutely built it way beyond what it was. So it seems like you have a knack for taking something small and growing it. What is that like? I mean, a lot of people are scared, I think, of doing something like that, of changing a program or building it and growing it. How do you approach that?
Yeah, for me, it's little goals and little wins at a time. I talk about the little wins game, but before you can even get kids to go to the edge of creating great content and building like an award-winning atmosphere in the room, it's about building the culture and the connections in the room and like that line of trust. I know the first day of class, I always talk about respect between me and the students, vice versa, and respect between one another. And we really like implement that every day. We clap for others until it's our turn. That's another quote I say is like when our teammates win and have a great day or something goes well, we celebrate them until it's your turn for you to take that little win. So we're always talking about that. It takes time to build the mindset of it's okay to fail and sometimes like being a failure can hurt, temporarily, and then the next day you like pick yourself up be a better person, learn from the experience, and come in the door and be ready to work again. So those are some things that, like, to build a program you instill in the first couple months before you even start talking about, you know, becoming an all-Kansas winner, winning state and national awards, photographer of the year, whatever it might be, all the different awards. You got to build that culture, that environment, that home for the students first in the classroom.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal for me. I mean, that's something that regardless of the place I've been in, it's been different at West and K-State and Mays, how I did that because of the different kinds of people I'm working with, from 22 and 23-year-olds that were just a few years younger than me to kids that barely saw their parents at night because they were working third shift, to, you know, the Mays students who have very, very involved parents, sometimes, you know, overly involved, but I'll take overly involved over not involved any day, by the way.
Right.
And so you have to also, like, have a bunch of conversations at the beginning. I always talk about SWOT analysis with my staff and programs in the building, talking to the administrator about what they want to see from the program in year one. One of the most helpful things about setting goals, I went to this conference, IT conference in Kansas City, and they talked about if you set 10 goals, you're likely only going to achieve 2 to 3 of those. If you set 5 goals, you're still going to only achieve about 2 or 3 of those. And then, so hey, just set 3 goals and try to meet those 3 goals.
Right.
And, like, don't set too many goals. So, like, I like to set, like, culture and atmosphere goals, like contest and competition goals, and then, like, growth for the publication, or we're going to participate in volunteer hours, or we're going to create a fundraiser. Like, that'd be like the third element of the goal. So setting different types of goal for the program really helps too. And talking about, like, actively talking about those goals week to week with your staff really helps too. Inventing hashtags for the theme of the semester, the theme of the school year with this specific staff. Because as you know, as a teacher, once you think you have something down, you get a new group the next year that may not understand too well, or they're picking up things much faster. So adapting and being flexible to the environment and the people you're given has been a big key to building those programs too.
Right. You know, an interesting connection with you that I feel like I've never made until this exact moment is you're talking about, you know, how you were originally brought to journalism through sports, through the lens of sports, and you were an athlete yourself.
Yeah.
And I feel like now hearing you talk about your students, you have a very sports mentality of, you know, hey, if you do fail, like, it's going to hurt. No way around that, but you got to pick yourself up. You got to try again. I feel like that's a very sports way of, you know, if you lose, you got to get back out there. You got to let it go. Don't let it color your next game. Do you feel like you see some coaching sports stuff in the way that you interact?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the books I read, such as I read Kobe Bryant's book, David Goggins' book, some of the other are athletes, people that are, like, super incredibly competitive at the things they do, and they, like, really break down the process of getting from, like, here to there, you know, chapter by chapter, page by page. So I feel like I definitely take a coaching mentality, and so much sometimes that I have to check myself, right? And remember, like, to be this mentoring, caring person that's asking, like, how their weekend went, and asking them about, like, mom and dad, if they liked your video, and things like that. So there's often points where I'll, like, take a breath and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've talked way too much about contests and awards this week and pumping that, and I haven't, like, broken down the little things of how we even got to this, was, like, establishing relationships and building a bond between the students. So sometimes I even have to check myself on being a coach to just remember to be a person first.
Right.
Yeah.
So interesting that you did kind of go from high school to college to high school again. What was that like? You've mentioned a little bit kind of the age difference, but what's the difference between advising in a college setting versus a high school?
Yeah, making the jump from West to K-State was actually fairly easy because I'm so hands-on in the trenches kind of advisor that they really hadn't had an advisor quite to the style of me, so they really, like, loved it, you know.
That K-State had not?
At Kansas State,
they have it.
Yeah, okay. So somebody that, you know, there are many advisors at the college level that aren't there on deadline nights when they're finishing newspaper and magazines. I would make sure, and it's easier with a magazine. There's only 4 of those work nights a year, right? Compared to a newspaper. But my magazine staff or yearbook staff, I would make sure on big publication nights or deadline nights that I'd stop by, give feedback on a story, talk up to them about a design, bring donuts, and just be like an active person in the newsroom. And that was just like a high school style that I developed. That actually, it was funny because there'd be points where my editors would say like, we don't need you as much as like you're giving us because we're like adults now, right?
Yeah.
And to step back in a nice way. And that was awesome because it's easier to step back than like step forward in regards to like how hands-on you are. And then adjusting to advising college students and how much they did need me, and coming back to the high school level at Mays, it took actually a lot longer to get back to that style of how much I was needed. And then you throw in the COVID aspect of like the learning loss, and at times like the empathy, the apathy to like do specific assignments and like meet deadlines has like obviously affected students in a way that there are many times, not many times, I would say there's times where I'd be sitting on my computer or doing another task where I'd catch myself and I'd be like, okay, you used to be able to take 12 minutes before you went and saw how well your students were doing, and now that 12 is like 9 or 7 because of their ability sometimes to be off task or not focus on things, and I'd have to check myself in that aspect even to this day. So I think making the jump from high school to college, super easy. From college back to high school with the additional factors and variables that COVID brought with how our students are learning and like their focus levels, that has been a bigger adjustment for sure.
Yeah, I think we're still in this educational setting, still learning, and will be for many years, just exactly what impact COVID had. There's definitely the positive impact of all of us are so much more equipped to do things virtually and to have asynchronous content, and just the accessibility of knowledge is much higher. But there's definitely, like you said, some learning loss, there's some apathy, and not just with the students, I mean, with ourselves as well in some cases, I think. So I'm glad you brought that up, because we feel that still for students that have had 3 years, whether it's, especially at that age, I mean, if it's 3 years of high school or 3 years of college, to me now at 35, that doesn't feel like much of my life, but to them, that's a huge part of their life that makes a very big impact. So I'm sure that adjustment was, much stronger because of that.
One thing we talk about too, and this is, it's easier to teach this and ask the students to do it than yourself sometimes. Then you follow your own, take your own medicine. One thing I'd like to say to my students is, if you're having a bad day, I want you to try as hard as possible for me not to really know it when you walk in the door. So we try to leave things at the door, like whether it be a boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with you, you got in a fight with your mom or dad this morning before you came to school. I said, we're not always able to push through those things and not show it, but I can tell you, you won't really, 9 out of 10 times, you're not going to know if I had a good morning or bad morning, because I carry the same approach into class, and I'm going to be like the best version of myself. And I just like try to instill that as much as possible, right? So like if I'm doing it at like a 98% level, if most of the kids in the room can do it at an 85 to 90% level, that's possibly better than the three other classes that they have that day that they maybe possibly don't want to be at, right? So I feel like my students buy into that mentality. And that is, I mean, and this might come up as well later, but all the soft skills and additional things that are being built in the room, even if they don't want to become college or professional journalists, right?
That's huge. Yes, we will get into that. And in fact, let's just talk about what you do at Mays and like what types of publications and broadcasts and all the things that your students actually produce under your guidance.
Yeah. So in Mays, I would say I'm about 90% broadcasting and video. And then the other 10% of my job is I'm very involved in Fusion Online, maysnews.com. And then I play a part in the news magazine as well, mostly reading copy and reading stories and like checking them over and things like that. And then I'll look over the news mag before it goes to press, just for little things. I have a partner. Her name's Jody Johnson.
Gotcha. Okay.
So she's like does the news magazine and the website and is that presence in the program. And we've converged all our media. So we are unique in the area that we are called One Mays Media. So all the student journalists of Mays High and Mays South are contributing to this One Mays ideal that started with the former superintendent Chad Higgins, and we just kind of took the name and ran with it. And first we were One Mays Broadcasting, and this is my 4th year of the broadcasting kids have been together the past 4 years. The news mag and the writers, photographers, designers, they've only been together the last 2 years.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
We merged it all into what we call converged media, where 35 to 45 kids per semester, depending on the semester, are taught by Jody and I, where we start together twice a week for intro and things to know what's coming up. And then we like branch off to our respective places. So while we're doing the One Maze show, they're working on the Fusion News magazine. And then the students that aren't working on those 2 major publications are working together in multimedia ways on the website. So that could be like a news package with a video and a photo gallery. It could be a feature package with like graphics and illustrations and pull quotes and like a man on the street style video or a mic'd up session with an athlete. And so we feel like that's kind of our specialty, something we're really good at in Kansas. And there's a couple other really good schools too, such as like Mill Valley, Lawrence, Shawnee Mission East. But we found a way, and you have to have these kids in the same class, the same hour to do this, right?
Right, absolutely.
Slack is just not good enough.
Yeah.
Right, to create like cohesive multimedia packages, like multimedia storytelling. And we look at the schools that are doing it really well at the college level. We look at the New York Times and the other places that are combining the different kinds of storytelling methods into one package with multiple contributors, sharing like special skills that they each have, and then like coming together and telling the story in a bunch of different ways within the same link, right, URL. So that's One Maze Media. And then I teach 21st century journalism in an intro broadcasting class. The other thing that gets me super hyped, that's been like a refreshing part of my career, is Seamless Productions.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. How is that different and or related to what you're doing with One Maze Media?
Yeah, so that's like our video creative agency that is just me. It's about 15 to 20 kids in our class, and there's classes similar to this at universities such as Wichita State, K-State, and KU, but like the mini video creative agency approach. So we're creating sports hype videos, PSAs, commercials. We branched out into weddings. So
wow,
we did about 5 weddings last year and already have 3 scheduled for this year.
Really?
So that we can talk about that a little bit more in a minute. That's been the most challenging, but we compete in Horror Fest competitions. We created a public address for the city of Mays. We've worked with Moxie Junction, Heartland Credit Union, Pearl OBGYN, and College Hill to make a commercial for them.
Wow.
And just like all the stuff that is not broadcast storytelling, like video storytelling and making a show and stories, all that other video stuff falls under this class. In addition to Tea Time, which is a podcast we do that's like anonymous student confessions, and I was so against it at the beginning.
I can see how that would scare you.
Oh yeah, right, like First Amendment rights. And then they were anonymous, and next thing we know, it's we just found out a week ago, it's one of the 7 podcasts in the whole country to be named in Student Television Network Broadcast Excellence Podcast finalist.
Wow.
In its first year, which is crazy. I never would have thought. And like kudos to Nathan Whittick out at our place for like bringing this idea to life. Talk about a niche podcast, right? He had just such a specific niche idea, and it's just blossoming. Number 1 on our website 4 months in a row, like for views and like traffic.
That's crazy.
Kids love it. Even the teachers, it's like the community, the district office, they know about the podcast. They talk about it. It's really doing well. And then our other one is the Spotlight podcast, which has been around, which is kind of becoming Spotlight Sports Podcast. We're trying to take a more niche approach, but we wanted to put a spotlight on people in the community, and then it became this like very open net we were using for just like bringing in cool people. Nate Van from the Wichita State track team just came in, and he had such a cool story. He's from OU and is like a rapper, and we had like a Wichita State track athlete on a Mace podcast. It's awesome, right?
Yeah.
And so that is like Seamless Productions and everything we do in that class. So the reason that's been so refreshing is because it blends like working with clients and the money side and like the financials and making smart business decisions and negotiating, and like the students are learning all these skills, while they're a part of the class making the videos. We bring in clients for meetings, and the first time we bring in a client and it's a student's first client meeting, I'll really lead. And then from there, you should watch like their fourth or fifth one as a junior or senior, they just like lead it. And I just like sit back and watch them guided through the form and ask them all these important questions about the vision of their video. And so they're learning half the business side and half the video side in Seamless. It's awesome. It's been extremely refreshing for me to have something else besides just the storytelling.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the business side is a gap, I think. It was for me, it is for me in some cases still, that, our industry is very freelanceable, very contract, very gig-based sorts of things. But if you don't know how to handle the budgeting and the, promotion part and timelines and all of that, which typically a typical creative education doesn't necessarily hit that part.
Right.
So the fact that you are hitting that at a high school level is really incredible. I'm sure they're learning a lot from that.
Yeah, so, we got to become a student of the things we're not that knowledgeable about and bring in the experts when we're not that expert in that area. So,
Yeah.
we'd bring in Drake Comeyer, we'd bring in River City Visuals, we'd bring in other local maze people we knew, drone experts, people like that, and we'd have conversations about the business side of it while they were a guest speaker in our class.
Mm-hmm.
And also looking at rates online for how much people are charging and studying other people that are professionals. That really filled the gaps in the area like I wasn't familiar with when I built Seamless. The class of Seamless I built in a summer.
Wow.
And just like crossed my fingers and hoped. Really just I had to convince my administrator that we were going to have enough video requests to warrant building a class. Because initially we were just taking side requests while we were making the show and we couldn't keep up. So I tracked everything for like a full year and to make the case for building the class. And it was like, okay, we're doing 15, 20 projects this semester. Okay, now we're doing 30 projects this semester for all these clients. And yeah, Seamless has been amazing. Yeah.
That's the other thing. As I'm talking to you, I'm hearing, like I said, kind of the sports side of things, sort of the coach mentality.
Yeah.
But then at the very same token, I can see that you sound different when you're talking about the way that you interact with the students versus like the administration and how you're mentioning, we do a SWOT analysis and we, keep track of the data and we do this.
Yeah.
That when you're trying to sell administration to say, hey, let me try this, they're not going to go with your gut instinct, right? It's like, trust me, it's going to be great. But it sounds like you really do the work to prove to people. I smacked my mic. I'm getting so excited about this. But you do the work to prove to people, hey, this is going to work. I've done my homework. I know what's going on. How do you approach that part? Yeah,
it's funny. I remember when I was at West, they had they brought students in an auditorium and they talked about code switching. Have you ever heard of that word called code switching?
Yeah.
So it's like the way you talk and relate and connect with adults is very different than the way you talk and relate and connect with your students. And then the third side of you is like that person at home that's like mom or dad and has to play those like different roles at home.
Interesting.
And so for me, man, there's a different Spencer with my friends compared to Mr. O'Daniel. They just call me OD.
I love that.
OD, Mr. OD, all kinds of nicknames through the years. But OD is stuck, Which
is so funny because that could have a whole other connotation.
Yeah, so our wedding hashtag was like the real ODs instead of the real OGs. And I tell my students
really
that, and they're like so young, they don't even know what the real OG means. So they're like, that is lame and corny, OD. So code switching is like super important. But I guess like what prepared me the most to have those like tough adult conversations, and my boss, Dr. Lindsay King at the Career Academy, she has embraced all these things I've wanted to do. She's like the best boss I've ever had and has just like let me roll with how I like wanted to do things. And I was like, believe in me, believe in the vision. I track everything. I'm systematic in like my approach and like I'm thinking about things months, years in advance. Just trust me and then convince your people to let us do it, right? And so a lot of the things I learned at Kansas State through the business and meeting new people in the community and watching my boss, Steve Wolgast, he's at KU now. He's the night chair of audience engagement. Watching him relate to people and do like the business jargon and lingo. A lot of those things at K-State prepared me for all these tough adult conversations on building the program at Maze. And then the student side's always been easy. Like that's been the side that has come naturally easy. But man, I brought some pretty big ideas to the table that I've tried to be trailblazing in approach to what people are asking of us. Like truly, like, I mean, the requests and the video things we got, they were honestly an annoyance my first year or two, because I just was trying to focus on making the One Maze show.
Like, we don't have time for this.
No. And then finally I was like, you know what? They're not going away. Everyone wants us to make their videos and do things for them because they need like a cheap option. And the visual storytelling is so much more important over the last like 5 to 10 years than it's ever been, right?
Yes.
All the companies and organizations are putting more money and emphasis into like the video visual storytelling. Well, we were seeing it right when I started at Maze. So the annoyance, I was like, I'm going to take this from being annoying and like we're going to make this into a class where we can make it like a positive and it'll work for us.
Mm-hmm. Embrace it.
We embraced it. And so I guess like the K-State side prepared me for the adult, and then the student, and it's very hard to do this, right? Like you flip the switch and you become like Spencer, husband, dad at home.
Right.
And it's just like code switching. And I have to tell my kids about code switching and like their language sometimes in the classroom, and like your Lakin Division I gamer and how you talk in gaming has to be very different than the presence and the editor-in-chief of the One Maze show. And like, for the most part, they embrace that code switching.
That's fascinating. You know, you had asked if I'd heard of that term, and I have. However, the only scenario in which I've heard of it is in terms of specifically the African American community, that from using like AAVE at home or with friends, and then getting into a predominantly white area where they feel like they can't use that, or that they'll be thought of differently, and having to switch to more of a quote unquote white way of speaking is how I've heard of it.
Sure.
But I've never heard of it in this more expansive view. So that's fascinating, thinking of it from code switching for all sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's like personality switching. I wish I could come up with a better like word than personality, but when I think of code switching, I think of just talking. When I think of what I was just talking about is like really a personality approach, connection changing based on the person in front of you and the people you're talking to.
Yeah, like a communication strategy almost.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's an interesting way to put it. And it's an interesting conversation, I think, which we don't need to get into right now, but there's sort of one school of thought of be yourself. People will like you or they won't, and I agree with that. And we're not saying switch who you are, but I do definitely think there's a place for optimize for your audience in whatever that is. We would be silly to say that we talk to our students at school the same way as our toddlers at home, right? So optimizing for your audience while maintaining true to yourself is an art form that can be difficult, and it seems like you've done a really good job of that.
Yeah, I try to be like fiery, passionate, energetic when I'm teaching and in front of the room. And man, it's talk about you go home and you flip that switch like I was talking about, and trying to keep that same energy for your kids and like your spouse, and just like doing the laundry and the at-home task, man, that can be really difficult because it's like this just exhale after you get done teaching all day.
Yes.
And the energy level that like I try to bring, and it's this exhale, and it's like, oh my gosh, I just wish I could bring like 50% or 60% of the energy to like my family. And like as a teacher, educator, or even like a doctor or nurse, or any environment where you're just emotionally charged all day, that is like the toughest task. It's something it's like, and it really connects with work-life balance. It's like something I'm still working on in year 11, turning 35 this year, that I don't have down. But advising student media is so difficult in that aspect because I feel like we're always on. You can talk to Amy DeVault about that, but we feel like we're always on and having to stay connected on what's going on to be really, really good at our jobs.
Yeah.
And so, man, I'm a work in progress on that. Like I'm still learning the work-life balance for sure.
Aren't we all? That is, that is a struggle. Well, talking about how you have created this environment where the administration trusts you, the students look to you and are guided and encouraged by you, that has created a culture in which you and your students have won lots of awards, have had lots of accolades and attention. How did that happen, and how did you make sort of competitions and contests a priority for your team and your students?
Yeah, I mean, that feels like a whole podcast in itself, right? And like each place has been different. So I think at West, it was the most challenging because we were literally just trying to build some self-confidence in students in a low socioeconomic environment that like some of them had zero confidence in themselves, didn't believe in themselves. So it started with small compliments, and then it's just like really just like to build it from scratch is like one stinking Lego block at a time, right? Like it was like one block at a time from small and taking lots of losses along the way and realizing like, hey, we have somewhere to go. And I feel like at the beginning of building the contest and competition culture in my program at West, like it was years of losses.
Yeah.
Until like year 3 when we started seeing some small things happening. So students don't think about things year to year, or like they don't think of your program as a program because like there's turnover, like they're a part of your program and then they move on and then it's just like the next kid's up.
Right.
And even at the college level, you'll have a great staff writer for a year and then they move on.
Whereas, that's so different. Like, you only get to keep them at best 4 years.
Yeah. So this is like the coach mentality is like I talk to new advisors and advisors I've been a mentor for, and I'm like, you're not going to really see the contest and competition culture build for about 3 or 4 years, because there's the trust and respect, and we talked about like the connections and the culture of the room that have to be built first before they like just push themselves endlessly to win that award, or like I'm gonna apply for that scholarship that's like super competitive that I may not win, but I'm just gonna give it a shot because like, oh, Daniel's still gonna be proud of me at the end of the day that I tried.
Yeah.
And
love
so even still to this day, we talk about in our program, we're lucky enough that it feels like every week or 2 we're winning something, and we've in a way, even some of this is so weird to think about 17 and 18-year-olds, because like in Mays, they become almost numb to the success at times. Yeah. Whereas like we win something, the next day it's like a new day and it's awesome, and what's next? Like, what am I at next? Yeah. But that's such a cool approach to have. And then we remember it's awesome because, and this is the coaching coming back out. It's like when we do lose, we take a lot more time to talk about that in class. Or like if we get a critique that says we have all these places to work on, well, let's build an approach, taking 2 or 3 things, not 10, right? And like, let's build an approach to get better for our next episode. So I think I've always told them like, be more motivated by the losses than fixating on the wins. Because
That's a great quote right there.
the wins, like people forget about very quickly.
Yeah.
And then the losses, like there's some self-growth along the journey of getting better from the loss that are like those soft skills, life skills, being, knocked down and getting yourself back up. Like all those things are happening during the loss and getting to that win after the loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move into soft skills a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I'm curious about that. I know in my time, actually, well, for the listeners who don't know, you and I went to undergrad together, and then I think our grad school overlapped too, I want to say by a little bit. So I know that from what we learned in undergrad, even the stuff that I'm not directly using, which is most of it, to be honest with you, but, I think about even the public speaking types of classes that I took and how I could not be a teacher right now had I not learned those. I didn't intend to teach originally. But if I had not learned how to communicate to a group of people in an effective way without being terrified, I wouldn't be here, literally. So I'm curious, not all of your high school students go on to become journalists. Many do, probably, but not all of them. So what transferable skills are you seeing that your students are learning in your program that could help them, whether they go on to be an engineer or a nurse or anything else?
Yeah, I'd say it's as simple as teaching them how to create like a meaningful email with like a subject line that grabs the attention, that's not going to go get spam or deleted. Yeah. And then build just the essentials of an email are being taught. I just like don't really remember any classes that talked. It was like you just assumed that we all knew how to send emails, but these kids don't necessarily know how to do that the right way.
Nope, so I've gotten some where that is proven.
Right, and so it's as simple as that. And then obviously it's this like never-ending team project, right? Where you're working with sources and communicating people with sometimes that bail on you, or you show up and you've been waiting a week for them and then they can't come because their kid's sick. So they're learning like all these lessons to life in general that you and I and normal people deal with every single day. And they're getting this sneak peek for a grade before they like go to college.
Right.
And so team building, overcoming obstacles and hurdles, communicating, what do you do when you're working in a team and you have that one person that's not contributing? Like, are you going to sit there and mope, or are you going to like pick up the slack because you still want the final product to be great, like the expectations for the program anyways? And so also working with different kinds of people. I can tell you, like, the designers and writers of our program are very different from the broadcast and video kids. And it's awesome to sit back, Jody and I will sit back and watch them like talk and game plan and strategize packages and storytelling ideas together. And we see some of like the growth and the wheels spinning in that conversation are just amazing.
Oh,
like
I bet.
Sitting back and watching.
It probably starts out very challenging and frustrated, and then once they hit a flow, can become great, I would guess.
Yeah, because sometimes you'll be needed to jump in just to like get them past that one little like mental hurdle of the storytelling that they can't get through on their own, and then like they just, oh yeah, OD, thank you, and like, okay, you can go back to the classroom, we got it from here.
Yeah.
And then they pick it up and they whiteboard it out and they plan and strategize. I mean, that's part of it too, is like the planning, the strategizing, we always like to talk about having backup story ideas and like a plan B, a plan C. And just recently we had this baseball story in our show that was like literally plan D and won a national award. And like,
wow.
Those are some amazing moments, right? It's like when everything falls apart and like, you know, you're a week before the show and we don't even know we're doing O'Daniel. And then our editor, who I was speaking of earlier, he just like keeps coming up at Lake, and he like passes this story idea along to this group of kids that he wanted for a podcast because he was just trying to be a team player. He's like, you guys can have it, because he knew this pitcher that's going to K-State who had never had varsity playing time.
Wow.
And instead of bringing him on the podcast, Lakin passed the idea to some other teammates. Next thing you know, it's like the best video in our show.
That's incredible.
And like those like, that's so cool to see. Like that's the kind of stuff that makes it worth it right there. Is man, you could have taken that and it could have been a good podcast, and then like boom, you just gotta pass it on, and like national award winner plan D. Like everything. So like those are some super growth moments. Lakin's growing as a person and just being a great teammate, and those guys are pushing through like everything just to create a story for the show, and then that happens. It's like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
That was just something that happened like in the last 2 weeks.
That's so. I need to meet this Lakin kid now too. Yeah. We need to have him on.
You should have him on. He's been on a couple podcasts. Like he's been on a few esports podcasts, and he's a natural. He'd be so good. Like bring.
Oh, I'm adding him to the list.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. He's going to OU for broadcasting too. So you guys, so you can do the esports talk. You can do the broadcasting talk.
So is he a senior this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll get you his contact stuff.
Thank you.
He's gonna love this.
Yes, Lakin, you're up next, buddy.
Yeah.
So how do you, this is maybe more a question that I just want the answer to be honest with you, because it's something I think that I struggle with as an educator, and probably is something that anybody who's managing a team at all struggles with. How do you hit the balance? Because you talked about problem solving and how empowering your students to figure things out on their own. How do you hit the balance between providing the right amount of guidance while also not hand-holding, if that makes sense? And I see you like shaking your head, so I know this. I'm not the only one that this is hard for, which is validating to me.
Yeah, I think I just like really try to break things down and like break my students down into like 3 levels. I hate to be so narrow-minded in this approach, but I think of it as like my intro kids are like a 0 or a 1 on a 1 to 10 scale of like their knowledge. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you look on our website right now, there's some stories from contributing reporters where I had to be very hands-on and storytelling approach. You know, they know how to put a story together because we talk about it, but it's like coming up with like really crafty leads and like really writing like concise, short, but interesting transitions. Like that's a skill that can take writers 2, 3, 4 years to do at a high level.
Right.
So I was, you know, I'm like sitting beside them, like really coaching them. I like to almost start sentences, transitions. Like I'm going to give you the first 4 words, and this transition is usually going to be about 15 or 20 words. I'm going to give you the first 4 words, and then like you help me finish it. Right.
Oh,
and that's
I like that.
That's like something I would do with like a beginner. And then your intermediate, you know, with intermediate editing, for example, on a sports hype video, you know, we talk about, okay, well, to take your sports hype video to the next level, it's probably going to include some After Effects ideas or some new graphics or the way you edit in Premiere, or even like maybe we should go out and like spend 30 minutes doing the drone stuff today, or we should go out with the gimbal and be effective in your movements with the gimbal and capturing classroom footage. Like, so like in my head, I've been doing this so long, like that I know the tips and strategies for like the people, like 3 notches, right? Like the beginner, I know strategies, and then like the intermediate kids. And then surprisingly, the toughest kids are like the advanced award-winning kids that you're trying to push to like the next level.
Gotcha.
Like those 8s, 9s, and 10s in ability, and 8s, 9s, and 10s in like winning contests and their strategy and ability to storytell and things like that. Those are the really tough kids, especially the kids that, and they're going to laugh when they hear about this, the kids that have been around the program for 3 or 4 years that have built up such confidence. Such as Lakin or my other editors, for example, and all my editors are going for like video, film, broadcasting, and like different fields and stuff. And to try to get them to that next level can be difficult because sometimes their time allotment and their schedule has grown in so many other areas that the person that they were their sophomore year, like that spongy mind that was willing to embrace anything, they don't necessarily have that philosophy in their final semester because they're thinking graduation, they're thinking moving on to college, what's the big summer vacation with my friends. So they're not the same person that they were when they started in the program and they were just embracing all ideas. They're having to like filter the things they want and the things they don't have time for, like they're just going out the door.
Yeah.
And so, but what I do is like, I'll sit with those kids and I'll be like, let's watch Christopher Columbus High School out of Miami and like listen to the way they write their voiceover scripts between their talent. And like they're so effective, but they're using like awesome language to be even better storytellers. So we'll like really nitpick the like intricate details of the stuff they do, get even more into sequencing. What's an award you haven't won yet? Like that's a question that I ask some of them is like, okay, we know you've done this, like you're a state champion at KSBA, you've won NSBA stuff, but like you haven't won this yet. So like, what are we going to do to get you to win this before your senior year? That always gets them motivated too.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
So right now the thing we're talking about is so many of them have just, a page long of awards. It's like we're trying to win a 6A state championship. Well, what's cool about that is it's a team goal. So I get to talk about it in front of the whole class all the time. We have a hashtag, We Are One. And the 1 stands for something we hold up at the beginning of the room to grab attention. It's as simple as that, but it's also we are 1 in like our storytelling approach, 1 Mays Media. We're not 2 different high schools. So the 1 stands for so many things for us. Also, I'm getting excited.
Right.
It stands for like trying to win state and be number 1.
Yeah.
It's as complex as that. And so the 1 means everything. And so for many of them, it's the only thing they haven't done yet. And so this final goal is a goal that affects the whole program and obviously makes the Mays Career Academy look really awesome if we pull it off, right?
Right.
So we set individual goals along with our team goals.
It sounds to me like you have kind of expertly figured out how to meet every student where they are, which I know is so difficult, but so important. Is that kind of how you approach it?
Yeah, I'd say I'm like 80 to 90% there. There's still, there are simply some students that sometimes are unreachable.
Sure.
But, and those are the ones that like definitely keep you up at night. I mean, if you'd ask them, they would probably think like, hey, Daniel is like so focused on the great product and the award, like that he like didn't take the time to like sit with me. I needed more attention and maybe that's what you're seeing, but it's not what's actually happening in my brain. Like those are the ones that like really keep you up and have you thinking on the weekends and wondering why you didn't take more time with that individual student. So those like every year you have a couple of those that, man, I wish I had it back and I could have done things differently.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that's just like being a caring teacher in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So as we kind of close up today, we've gone through a lot of really fascinating things. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share about either Mays or kind of your storytelling history or anything else that you think would be, we can't have you leave this room without sharing with us?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a little bit corny, but I
love corny. Let's do it.
Yeah, so I think like I've had just so many like amazing professional like women to help me along the way. I think you're gonna like this. Like from like my high school advisor was just this like super strong, like bold woman that her name is Shara Taylor. She's retired now. But she like was just so hard on me, especially like in her English class. Like she had me for English as well, and she was so hard on me. And then like she flipped a switch and was like a different kind of broadcast media advisor in that other class I had with her.
Oh.
But she expected so much of me. And then I came here and like I had, Lisa Parcell and Amy Duvall. And then I had Sharon Martin, a student, teach me. And then obviously it stems back from like my grandma and my mom raising me and stuff. So man, when I think about like the people that have just motivated me to be this like super competitive, like caring, I don't know, whatever you want to call me, advisor, it's just been like really strong women along the way. It's like, and then like my wife's just been so supportive over the last few years. So she's like just the cherry on top, right? So while I've had lots of like male teachers and advisors that like I've learned things from, like strong women have really motivated me along the journey. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you don't see a ton. I mean, it's changing, and it depends which parts of the industry that you're in, but in tech stuff in general, it's still relatively male dominated. So it's very, very cool to hear you say that. That's awesome.
Well, I think it's cool because like I was telling you about like the people that get me motivated earlier. I mentioned a lot of men, but it feels like at the core, like the people that have built Spencer and like who I am have been the women. Yeah. So it's been a nice blend, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I feel like honestly, like, you'll be a great, podcast interview. People like listening to you. But personally speaking, I've learned a ton from you just in this, 40 minutes, however, that we've been talking. Because as a fellow educator, I can see the things that you're doing, and I can see things and go, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. I love to learn from you, and I hope to continue learning from you in the future. So
thanks for letting me tell my story.
Thank you. Absolutely. Appreciate you very much.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'd like to offer one more big thank you to the amazing Spencer O'Daniel for joining us on the show today. I don't know about all of you listening, but I am left feeling inspired and motivated to just continue growing and creating. Spencer is such an asset to not only Maze, but everywhere that he has worked throughout his career, and I just know that even bigger things are in store for him down the road. Thanks again for listening today. This was episode 15 of the Create Space podcast, so we are just moving right along. It's been a really incredible ride. We actually passed the 1,000 download milestone just a few weeks ago, which was so exciting, and I have honestly just been loving every single minute of it. So for right now, I've got guests and episode topics booked out until about the end of May, but I wanted to ask you all if there are any specific topics or guests that you might be interested in hearing about in future episodes of Create Space. So if you have any specific ideas, please reach out, shoot me an email, at me on Instagram, send me a DM, send me a voice memo, whatever. I would love to hear about all of the amazing creativity that's going on in your world. So I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will catch you back here, same time, same place next week on Create Space.